her on because there is a presidential election going on in the
there
U.S.
is.
mainland. Yeah, and she's actually Maria, Mrs. G's granddaughter, and I've actually known Geawna for years since she was a little girl. A very smart, bright, intelligent person, and really involved, I want to say, and well abreast of politics, and particularly the presidential race. So, good morning, good evening to you, Geawna. Nice to see you.
Hi, how are you guys?
We're doing fine. Also in the Zoom room, we have Julian Jansen. He's been on our show previously.
Guys, who's watching the Facebook stream? If you could just turn it down.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Julian. I like it
Sorry
loud too,
about
bro. Right on. Julian, of course, of Progressive Democrats. Dr. Bavacqua is also with the Finogi Coalition and a staffer for Senator Kelly Marsh Titano. We're going to start with you, Geawna. What's the climate like where you're at with this presidential election? We're just hearing a lot of things. Bree was just telling us that they're boarding up the White House.
Yeah, I think I saw that on one of the national media reports.
Right.
Well, I stay in Los Angeles, California. I live near downtown where everything's being boarded up right now. However, I do work in Westwood, which is right outside of UCLA. And so to get there, I passed through Beverly Hills. And yesterday, they boarded up everything from Chase Banks to Soul Cycle to yogurt bars, and not just the windows, but even a couple feet. Like they were starting to put borders even on the sidewalks, just in case things get really bad. Today is election day. I did mail in my ballot a couple weeks ago, and in California, they have this option where you can track once they receive your ballot and that it's completed and your vote was counted. And so thank God mine was already, so I'm not, rushing to the polls today, but there will be long lines everywhere. And we were warned about traffic and just to be careful about everything going on. Mm-hmm. It's going to be really bad today.
Yeah, why? I mean, why? What's going on?
Well, on Halloween, Beverly Hills issued a statement saying that you could not be trick-or-treating or gathering in large groups. And if you did, they were to give you a fine. However, in the afternoon on the 31st here in Los Angeles, there was a huge Trump rally and no people were wearing masks, and obviously no one was social distancing. And so I think that kind of gave them a heads up. And they even warned us a couple weeks prior that the election was going to be really bad for both Biden supporters and Trump supporters. And whoever, wins, we just think it's going to get worse. And it's just going to be really scary. And so I'm just trying to go to work and go straight home and not do anything. They told us don't, try to stay away from grocery stores until they know what it's going to look like.
Mm-hmm. Is this your first presidential election?
No, this is actually my second. I turned 18 in 2015, so I was able to vote in 2016 when it was Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump.
Oh, okay.
And so it kind of seems like we're anticipating riots or, civil unrest. And I was telling Bree before the show what we saw with the Black Lives Matter protests. I mean, it's really scary to say that this presidential election and the results from it could create a more violent, a more severe backlash. How worried are you about that?
I'm very worried for that. Back in 2016, the day after he was elected, there was already protests and marches in downtown Los Angeles, right outside of City Hall. So now that it's been 4 years and, people are even more angry now, I just don't know what's going to happen from both sides.
So I think I kind of know who you voted for.
Well, she's wearing a Biden shirt.
Yeah,
I couldn't see it.
Yeah. Show us your shirt.
I donated to his campaign multiple times, and I've also donated to the DNC. And so I'm just hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst.
Wow. So you've been really active with politics out there, huh?
Yes, very active since the first election. I went to the Women's March, the very first one ever, and I think it just blew my mind away of how many people are, angry that we're moving back in time instead of moving forward. And as a young woman, especially a minority coming from such a small island, I just am trying my best to be as involved as possible and to be as educated as possible.
Well, thank you so much, Gianna. Do we see politics in your future?
I hope so. I hope to make it one day to the White House, but we'll see.
Wow.
All right.
Well, there you go. Let's,
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, let's take it over to Julian. And, I guess, Julian, because we've talked a lot of local politics with you. Nationally, though, I'm going to take a wild guess here, and maybe you're probably a Biden-Harris guy?
Yeah, at this point. I don't really find Trump at all desirable. I think he's probably the worst president that we've ever had. And, you know, I think that he's terribly mismanaged the COVID-19 situation, basically from day one. And beyond that, you know, just he doesn't stand for any of the stuff that I support. So, you know, it's kind of a really easy decision to make not to support him.
Well, tell us what you really think.
Yeah.
Dr. Mike, good morning.
Half a day.
Are you boarding up your windows or anything?
No, I think we'll be okay here on Guam, at least from
Hey.
a lot of that. But it is it's interesting because if the more things sort of get uncertain and sort of the more they get kind of crazy in the States, interestingly enough, the more people on Guam feel more open to discussions about decolonization and political status change, right? Because when America seems to be going in the right direction and and it seems like it's doing well, then it feels okay to be attached to the United States, right? But then at times when America, it seems like it's going crazy, or, you know, who knows what's going to happen with it. There's so much tension. There's so much, you know, fighting going on in it. Then people on Guam feel a lot of anxiety because wherever you are in the United States, you could at least say, even if your Godzu doesn't win, you could at least say you voted and you participated. So you have the chance to speak out and try to affect, from your perspective, from your corner of the United States, what happens next. But if you're in a territory, you're stuck. And so Guam could vote 100% for Trump or 100% for Biden, but it's irrelevant. And so, you know, that's why seeing all of the stuff going on in the States, there's this extra. It's interesting because if you pay attention to what goes on in the States from Guam, there's that extra level of anxiety because it's all going to affect you, but you're not a part of it. But then on the other hand, we see a lot of people just completely disengage. I mean, I heard somebody today who called Joe Biden Jobin because they weren't sure what exactly his name was. And so, because for a lot of people in Guam, that's a very distant sort of conversation. We don't really get to vote in that. So, but yeah, so that's why, yeah, I'm curious to see what's happening. I'm waiting for results from the U.S. too.
Right.
I think New Hampshire reported 26 votes so far.
Oh, wow. Who's winning? Mike, let's talk about, did you go around to the polling sites? What did you hear? What did you see?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely, from my perspective, low turnout. Everywhere, when I voted in Talonpogo, or at Talonpogo, there was absolutely no line. Just went in, voted, and then went out, you know. And then as I followed my Senator Kelly Marsh Titano, to different precincts, same thing, no long lines. And it was good. It was good to see some of the camps that were out there showing their support, you know, for their candidates, a little bit of normalcy in it. And so I think, I think the low turnout, as others have mentioned, I think it will likely favor incumbents who have sort of the name recognition. And I think that a lot of the newer candidates who were pushed into candidacy because of outrage over sort of like handling of the pandemic, outrage over a lot of different things, it may, and I may be proven wrong, but it may not have pushed a lot of people to the polls. It may have pushed them to comment angrily on Facebook. It may have pushed them to sort of share angry things on WhatsApp, but it may not have actually pushed them into the polls. And it could be for a lot of different reasons, but it could be because they didn't ultimately see candidates who reflected sort of what they wanted. There's new candidates, there's outraged candidates, there's candidates that have plans, but they may not have simply seen that any of them fit what they wanted for the island.
What about your Senator Kelly Marsh Titano, a frequent target of the Republicans during this campaign? I think they had, there's obviously a couple releases where they mentioned her, not by name, but saying things like, oh, well, the pandemic's raging. Our senators are putting signs up in hiking trails. So maybe if you could just a little bit on the type of campaign that Senator Marsh Titano ran and why she ran that way.
Well, and so I think, and so on the issue of the hiking safety bill, I mean, for me, even if you have sort of a pandemic going on, you can always address issues of public safety like that. Because what we saw early on in the pandemic was that there was a lot more accidents, a lot more lost hikers, a lot more sort of incidents like that. But to be honest, that bill was introduced last year, and it was just taken up sort of during the pandemic in session. But one thing that I sort of, that Senator Kelly Marsh Titano can be proud of, though, is that she was the one that pushed for the early voting. She introduced the bill to open up, to make it easier for people to vote by absentee during the pandemic. And through working with her colleagues in the legislature on a bipartisan basis, they eventually expanded it to the early voting window. And so I think for my Senadora, a lot of it comes down to, what are the ways, even if they're the small ways, that we can get government to work better for the people. And it may not be sort of the flashiest thing. Sometimes it won't get you the best headlines, but that's sort of what a public servant is supposed to do. It's not about sort of, getting all the attention, getting all the likes. It's really just about using the responsibility that you're given to try to sort of improve the lives of different people, of your average person on Guam. And so,
let's go over to Julian. Julian, did you go around and vote? Did you early vote? You kind of seem like an early voter.
Yeah, I voted pretty early, like roughly a month ago.
Wow.
I went with my mom and like during lunchtime, and we just drove in together. And it took it was over pretty quickly. It was like 10 minutes or something. So that was pretty good. I actually haven't been around today at the different polling sites, because I was working from home.
Right.
But from what I'm hearing, it seems like the turnout appears to be subdued, which hardly reflects the sort of grandiose, strange language that's been coming from the Republican Party about how everybody's so up in arms and we have this revolution of people coming out and speaking out and going to change things. I tend to agree with the general point of view that the overall environment does favor incumbents. I believe earlier on, my friend Will suggested that he thinks that there would be a smaller Democratic majority, or maybe even flipping or something. I don't really see that. And I'd love to see the results come in already. But
yeah, I know.
Yeah. Well, as we wait for the results, I really wanted to just bring Geawna back in here.
Right.
Because you do have there are nonpartisan races, one of them being the Guam Education Policy Board. And Geawna, did you get a chance to talk to your grandma?
Yes, I just want to shout out my grandma, Maria Gutierrez. She is, I'm so biased, but she is the absolute best board member on the island. She has been serving before I can even remember, and then she came back and served while I was a kid, and I went to public school. She did get out, when I transferred to private school because the stress obviously is so much. And she dismissed it so much and she just wanted to do better for the kids. And so she went back and she's been there up since I left Guam. And she is the first and only female, I want to say that. She's the first female and the only person from Guam to ever win the NASB Board of Education Award. So it just makes me so proud.
Yeah, she said she's so proud of you on our live stream chat.
Yeah,
so.
she makes a mean mango cheesecake too.
And mochi cupcakes.
Oh, the mochi cupcakes.
I know. She's so great. Everyone out here always asks me for the recipe or to make it. And I'm like, I can't. That's her thing.
Geawna, obviously very in tune with the politics on the national scene. How much attention do you pay to local politics here on Guam?
Well, I was about fifth grade when I started to get into politics on Guam. I believe it was the election where Underwood Uggin was running against Camacho Cruz. And so that really interested me. And so since then, I've always paid attention. However, out here, it is very hard, especially with what's been going on. This election out here is just it's so crucial. And so this year I haven't been paying much, but I do follow all the news networks. And obviously I follow all the updates, especially with COVID on Guam. But right now, this election between the president and the former vice president is so crucial to me. And I just can't look away. Like, this is all I do. I live, breathe CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, everything.
What did you make of those debates?
Well, I want to say Kamala Harris did, for me, she did amazing.
Sorry, I had to.
Kamala.
She did amazing. She is phenomenal. And, when she said, I'm speaking, Mr. Vice President, you don't know how many times I have debated my boy classmates on Guam, presidential speeches at my Jose Rios Middle School, where a lot of times I was interrupted by another boy and who was running against me. And it just reminded me that, you guys, we need to listen, and women need to have the same respect as the Vice President of the United States.
So you said you started paying attention to politics when Underwood Uggin ran. Did you pay attention at all to the congressional race that's been happening here on Guam this election? And what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I was a very advocate supporter of Congresswoman Madeline Berdalio. Going to public school in middle school and in elementary, she was really adamant about always putting the students first. She welcomed me to her office to discuss things that were going on into my elementary school, my middle school. However, this time I am not in favor of Michael Nicholas, but I do know that he is doing great things for Guam. So I'm definitely I'm very interested, and I'm just watching what's happening.
Right, yeah, as we all are. Julian?
Yeah, hi.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
You used to work for him, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I worked for him from 2013 to September 2019.
Wow.
Crossing from when he was a senator, so all 3 terms, and then part of his current term as congressman.
Right.
So
are you disgruntled?
And disgruntled, I would say disillusioned more than disgruntled. It's a very long process for me to sort of gradually realize exactly who I was working for all those years. And, it was very much an eye-opening experience to see allegations come forward from people that someone that I know and trust. John Paul is a friend of mine and has been, I knew him since like high school. And I know that he's a very honest person, and Mike Nicholas has tried to make it sound like there's some grand conspiracy to like vilify him. And, you know, I know what John Paul is about, and I know that he absolutely would never engage in that. You know, so I tend to believe what he says, although I can't corroborate every detail, you know, from my own personal experience. You know, but there are sort of indicators here and there to me that make me suspect that, you know, in addition to the trust that I have in him, that from my own experience, it seems to align with what I observed.
Let's talk about this low voter turnout in this congressional race. Who do you think low voter turnout favors out of the three candidates for delegate to Washington, D.C.?
I think it's very hard to know exactly who it favors. My guess would be that it would favor higher propensity voters. So whoever had the higher propensity voters would benefit from a lower turnout. I would guess that would favor Robert Underwood, because from my understanding, the demographics that they know about who supports him do indicate that he's viewed favorably from among Chamorros, among you know, elderly Mononco and middle-aged folks who are old enough to remember that he accomplished a lot and realize that he has done a lot for Guam, both as congressman and also as the president of the University of Guam. You see a lot of additional initiatives that have come out from the University of Guam, and it's a lot more. I feel like there's a lot more that's going on at the university because he was president. Because I feel like he was very passionate about issues involving sustainability and you know, environmental issues, and I feel like that he recognized the need to invest in those areas, and that we're now beginning to see some fruit from that. And I understand they also started the engineering program under him, and I think that's a good step forward too.
Miguel, low voter turnout. Who is it favor in this delegate race?
It's hard to. I mean, so it's hard to predict, but I would tentatively agree with what Julian said, that if you look at who sort of the demographics would be, so Underwood would have more of the traditional Democratic Party base. Will Castro may have a fairly good chunk of the Republican Party base. And then so Mike San Nicolas really probably draws more from independent-minded voters, people that aren't, you know, because that's who, when you think about Facebook, right? If you think about what sort of brought Donald Trump sort of the Electoral College victory, a lot of it is people that don't normally vote, but sort of were in this sort of Facebook world and they were drawn to vote. And that's why a lot of polls missed them in 2016, is because they were voters that tended not to vote. And so a low turnout most likely hurts the person who has sort of the less voters that are motivated or attached, right? And so we should all know that, and we should all know by now the huge gap between social media and reality, right? Is that you're, you know, just because people curate and manicure their lives online, whether there's a congressperson or an influencer or your best friend on Instagram, right? And it's the same thing in terms of how you're following on Facebook or you're following on social media versus how many people would actually show up to vote for you. And so I think that low turnout would definitely impact the current congressman more than the other two. But, you know, one thing that has been discussed a lot so far tonight, though, is will Republicans gravitate towards Mike San Nicolas the way that they most likely did in the previous election? Because if there is a lot of discontent out there towards the Magahaga sort of Lou, if there is a lot of discontent there, but they may not necessarily target it at the members of the legislature, but they may see Mike Nicolas as somebody who has challenged her, who has spoken out against her, who has called her out on certain things, whether they're real or not. And so that's something that he may benefit from, is that he may get enough independent-minded voters, he may get enough Republicans to sort of come to his side, and that could give him sort of enough to push him over the top.
Right. Some people though are calling it, an Underwood victory already. Some are saying that, well, we could see a runoff between St. Nicholas and Underwood, and then others are saying, well, you know what, it could be a Will Castro victory because it's a three-way race, and Underwood and St. Nicholas are splitting the votes. What are you guys calling it? Who are you calling it?
Let's start with Geawna. Mike, let's start with Geawna. Go ahead, Geawna.
See, now I'm a little unsure of how to gauge that, because I understand that Ron McNinch has had a number of surveys that earlier on, but not like right now, which indicated a substantial lead for Robert Underwood, and that would certainly be enough to make you think maybe he could do it. But I'm a little unsure that you can actually pull off a 50% or 50% plus one in a three-man race. So I would tend to think that that's not going to happen, but I could be wrong. And of course, we'll be seeing that probably tonight, but it'll be settled once the votes are tabulated.
Right. Yeah, that's the way it works. Geawna, can you unmute? Give us your take.
I have been an advocate for Underwood, and I really am hoping he does win this election. However, I do see a lot of younger people, especially on Twitter and on Facebook, going towards Mike Nicholas just because of what he's done and his approach to getting things done. However, Robert Underwood, he's not only a really great dean. Was the president of UOG, but I've seen him in action, in public schools when it was Chamorro Month, and he was such a strong advocate, and he also was one of the people who brought Chamorro studies into the public schools. And I just think you can't go wrong from there. And so I'm voting for, if I could vote there, I would vote for Underwood.
Mike, let me guess, Underwood.
Well, no, I would definitely like that, but I think it's a runoff. I think it's going to be a runoff. Right. That would be my guess, just because we don't have a lot of. I mean, this race has been so fascinating because we have seen very little from the incumbent. He's had Facebook posts, but he's actually campaigned very little. I tried to go back, and in more than a year, he didn't really have a public forum or public meeting with the community, like in the longest time. And this is long before he got sick, that just nothing. And so it does make you wonder. So it's hard to tell if his voters are still motivated, because he actually hasn't been engaging outside of just Facebook for the longest time. And so, I would say it's going to be a runoff. So that would be my guess.
What do you think if it's, let's say, for example, Underwood or even St. Nicholas, maybe they get 49% of the vote. Second place is, 10 or more percentage points behind that. Do you think we could see a concession from the losing candidate? Or does it depend on who it is?
I doubt it. I mean, part of me feels like it's hard to get into the mind of the current delegate, because I don't know if his heart wasn't into it this time around, because he just wasn't. I was tracking his website and tracking his Facebook posts, and just wasn't really putting a lot of stuff out there for a very long time. And so I don't know if it's the ethics scandals or other things that are kind of grinding down on him, but he seems to be over it. And I mean, I think that might explain the conversation that you had with him the other day too, is that I think, I mean, but I don't think that, I mean, in the conversation that Underwood had with Will Castro earlier, I mean, maybe Will Castro might concede because he seemed to be setting up for that just in how magnanimous and gracious he was. That, you know, if the Sina speaks, you know, if the Sina asks, you know, then you should obey. But no, I think that, you know, whoever would be second place, I think they would still want to fight it out.
Okay.
Well, thank you guys for providing your perspective. We are still waiting for
And
results.
still.
Yeah. When we last checked in with Adriana, it was